Hey folks, Brother Casey back at you here today, and I'm so excited to talk about our topic in our devotional series for You Better Be Glad, right? Our topic for today, last week we talked about this word, mercy. We said that's God's goodness towards those who are in misery and distress, according to Wayne Grudem. Well, Wayne Grudem also says this. We talk about this word today that's related to mercy, and that word is grace. And don't we sing that, right? We sing in church about grace. We celebrate grace. We talk about grace. We read about grace. Grace is a wonderful concept for us. Let's work on a basic definition. Grudem says this: grace is also God's goodness, just like mercy. But grace is God's goodness towards those who deserve only punishment. So we deserve the punishment from God. That's where we actually are, but we get, instead of punishment, we get grace. So a very popular passage, and I love this passage. I've got to watch my time because I'll end up preaching this thing right here, all right? 2 Corinthians chapter 12. If you have a Bible, 2 Corinthians chapter 12. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, we understand that the Apostle Paul is faithfully serving God. In faithfully serving God, he identifies, he says, I received, that means it was given to him, a thorn in his flesh, and he identifies it as a messenger from Satan. So this was something in Paul's life that he was given, and it was something that, in essence, it slowed him down. It attempted to delay him, distract him from his work of advancing the gospel. So what does Paul do? He does the same thing that you and I would do. He says, I prayed to God repeatedly. I prayed to God 3 times. And I said, God, take away this pain in my life, this obstacle in my life, this messenger of Satan in my life, this thing that's slowing me down from doing good work. Take this away. That's logical, right? Wouldn't God want to take away all of everything that causes us pain? And here's what the Apostle Paul says. Look for a word. You ready? So in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, Paul writes, but he, that's Jesus, we would understand, God, said to me, that's Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul then says, therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Here's the idea. Paul says, hey God, I know what you should do for me. God comes back and says, hey Paul, what I'm going to give you is not what you want. You want immediate relief. You want a quick fix. You want everything to be just perfect all the time. You want no struggle, no hardship, no storms, no difficulty. That's what Paul seems to want. That's what we want, right? And so Paul is saying, hey God, here's what you can do for me to fix what's going on in my life, and that's going to make me glad. God says, I got a better glad plan for you. My glad plan for you is this. I'm going to give you grace. What do we say that was? God's goodness towards those who deserve only punishment. So God tells Paul, you deserve punishment. I'm going to give you goodness. You deserve, in essence, pain. I'm going to give you goodness. Now, he goes on to tell him there, if we're looking in the verse, he says, my grace is sufficient for you. Why? Because our struggles, our things that hinder us, those things, they remind us that we're weak and that we're needy and that ultimately we're not God. So when we have God show up, God shows his goodness to us. He says this. He says, my power is made perfect in weakness. So our source of glad for today looks a little something like this. God has shown up in my life. Today, as my circumstances are, God is here. God is active. God is present. God is providing. God is showing me grace for the moment that I'm in. He's showing me grace for the moment that I'm in. And what we ask God to do, we want Him to take away all pain. What God does, though, is He says, I'm going to allow pain because pain, struggle for you, will cause you to identify that you're weak. And when you identify you're weak and you turn to me, my power can show up. God's power can show up in our lives. So he goes on. He says, therefore, I will do what? Boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses. Hey, today, my life's not perfect. Things aren't going just like I want them to. I've got some real struggles. And as I have those real struggles, can I tell you what keeps me here? What keeps me going? What keeps me holding on? What keeps giving me hope? It's this word, grace. God keeps showing me goodness. He keeps showing me goodness each day. He keeps showing me goodness through the breath in my lungs. He keeps showing me goodness with the opportunity that He's given me. He keeps showing me goodness with the people that are around me. Can you find God's grace being displayed in your life today? Can you allow that? If you can find it, can you then allow it to be a source of glad in you, a source of thanksgiving in you? Can you stop today for a second and say, thank you, God. My old car don't always crank. It cranked today. Thank you, God. Can you stop for a second and say, hey, God, the sun's out. Or maybe today, hey, God, the rain's out. Hey, God, it's snowing sideways. And I've never seen a good snow sideways. The idea for us is, in some way, our struggles should bring us to a point of awareness of our need for God. And then they allow us to see God and His goodness. Hey, God bless. I hope you have a great day. I hope that you'll find and discover more in depth God's grace being poured out in your life. And may that draw you closer to Him as you love and worship Him. Have a great day.